What began as a genius idea has turned into a real estate nightmare. The concept of short-term rentals was a simple one. Turn your home into a money-making machine by providing people with an alternative to traditional hotels. The truth behind Airbnb, Vrbo, and all the other STR companies is starting to come out, and now people and municipalities are rebelling. Today, there are entire neighborhoods throughout the United States where Airbnbs alone have seriously altered prices and neighborhood dynamics. From the west coast of California to the sunny beaches of Miami, hundreds of cities have outright banned the industry from their borders, blaming speculation, crime, and greed as reasons why STRs should remain illegal. The biggest of these problems is related to the park and profit theory that has enabled rich people to essentially snatch up properties using them as their own personal ATMs with the hope of seeing ludicrous returns, paying little to no tax, taking advantage of America's relaxed laws on home appreciation income. Now the general public is finally beginning to notice. With housing affordability at near all-time lows, the anger is building. A new wave of laws, along with customer complaints regarding transparency, pricing, market rigging, fees, and safety concerns has sort of cultivated into this massive bubble that is seemingly exploding overnight. You see, if you ever visit a tourist hotspot like Sarasota as an example, you will quickly realize that it's not uncommon to see entire buildings with only a few lights on, as many units are owned by the wealthy and left empty as rents are not as important as having a safe place to park surplus capital. This interesting phenomenon has led to thousands of units having been pulled from the long-term rental market to reap the higher returns of STRs. The situation in the Sarasota area is deeply unsettling. According to AirDNA, there are approximately 6,500 Airbnb listings, a staggering number for an area that is made up of 24,000 households. This means that nearly 1 in 3 homes are classified as an STR. This glaring statistic points to an alarming oversaturation, making it one of the most densely Airbnb populated regions in the entire United States. The rapid realization among affluent individuals that renting out second or third homes yields more significant profits than securing long-term tenants has set off a disturbing trend. This surge in investment has led to the widespread takeover of vast areas in the US by short-term rental neighborhoods. The consequences are dire as these returns drive up the overall price perception. Coupled with the speculative nature of the market, the situation is worsened by this Airbnb craze, acting as the turbo engine propelling an unsustainable bubble, especially in places like Florida. And as we will get to later, this unhealthy speculation is overflowing into bad loans, impacting the banking industry and therefore posing a threat to the entire financial system. The looming threat of an inflated market bubble raises serious concerns about the stability and sustainability of the real estate landscape in these regions. The widening affordability crises in the housing market is unmistakably exemplified by the astonishing surge in housing prices in Sarasota. Since January 2020, while the median price of homes across the United States has increased by a significant 47%, the escalation in Sarasota has been nothing short of staggering, reaching an alarming 68%. Unraveling the details of this dramatic rise reveals a disturbing factor: the pervasive influence of the Airbnb phenomenon. This unprecedented spike in housing costs is in part fueled by what can only be described as an uncontrolled obsession with Airbnb rentals. The allure of short-term gains from renting out properties on platforms like Airbnb has gripped the real estate landscape, enticing property owners to prioritize transient accommodations over long-term stability. This shift in focus has created a distorted market dynamic where the quest for immediate profits takes precedence over the pressing need for affordable and sustainable housing. The only other legal option we have that I'm aware of is something called a DSCR loan. We will get into these a little bit later, but these loans were originally meant for things like hotels, but since an Airbnb is kind of like a hotel, they have made their way into the residential market. The problem with these though is that they carry a higher interest rate and oftentimes require a minimum down payment of 25%. So as a first option, they are often ignored in favor of something that I consider abusive to the entire real estate marketplace, and that is the regular mortgage. The primary residence mortgage becomes a focal point in the strategies employed by speculative short-term rental operators. It is no secret that many of these operators opt for a conventional primary residence mortgage to fund their properties. The allure lies in the simplicity of the process, a 30-year payment plan, and the ability to make a minimal 5% down payment. However, from an external perspective, especially for those outside the industry, this practice is unequivocally recognized as mortgage fraud. The conventional mortgage, designed to cater to the needs of regular families in normal living conditions, is thus manipulated in a way that raises ethical and legal concerns surrounding mortgage practices within the STR industry. Conventional mortgages come with specific stipulations designed to reduce risks for the lending institution. Typically, they mandate that property owners live in the financed house for an extended duration and prohibit the commercial use of the property. Originally crafted to support the growth and prosperity of American families, these loans now find themselves repurposed for acquiring what essentially amounts to mini hotels. The departure from their intended purpose raises concerns about the ethical use of financial instruments designed to foster personal residence and community development. This form of abuse often goes overlooked by many banks and regulatory bodies, creating an environment where such practices thrive unchecked. Over time, these trends foster speculation, inevitably leading to an inflation of prices that impacts everyone. This isn't just a personal observation. A working paper from the Philadelphia Federal Reserve meticulously details the extensive scope of this issue. Originally published in January of 2023, this paper shows that some people lie about living in the homes they buy, a practice that is called occupancy fraud. This is done to get better mortgage terms. This was a well-known problem during the last housing bubble, but continues even now. The deception is widespread, happening in various types of loans, not just private ones. It is believed that about 1/3 of those claiming to be regular homeowners are actually investors. These fraudulent borrowers who get better loan terms are riskier and more likely to default at a significantly higher rate compared to honest investors. Their defaults are also more likely to be strategic, which means they intentionally stop paying when home prices fall. In the last 14 years, home prices have been steadily increasing, with a significant surge in the past 3 years. This has created a favorable environment for investors who thrive in such market conditions. However, it's crucial to recognize that if we experience a sustained economic downturn, the excessive use of abusive leverage by these speculators could swiftly erode the stability of the entire real estate market and banking system, just as it did in 2008. Now, to make matters worse, the greed doesn't stop there. If mortgage fraud wasn't enough, there are plenty of investors who max out on the regular mortgage abuse and move on to the next step in their leverage speculation. Many who exhaust their resources by acquiring favorable loan terms move on to something called DSCR loans. Now, to fully understand just how dangerous this type of speculation can be, we first need to understand how these loans function. And while it may sound complicated, it's really quite simple on the surface. The SCR, or debt service coverage ratio, distinguishes itself as a unique category of loans, setting it apart from conventional lending structures that rely on the borrower's personal income or assets. Instead, DSCR loans are exclusively anchored in the value of the property under consideration and its projected revenue potential. So essentially, these loans can be acquired with no income and no job. They were initially tailored for commercial properties but have recently found their way into the gray area known as short-term rentals, exemplified by platforms like Airbnb. So what happens in Florida and a lot of other touristy portions of this country is that you get a lot of people who specialize in acquiring properties via traditional mortgages, just like we talked about, but once you max out your loopholes in that area, you move on into the DSCR world, continuing to leverage your way into a massive ball of debt. Debt that looks like gold when things are going well. As you just saw there with that AirDNA data, even with today's conditions, it's very possible to generate a 20% cap rate on a good property, and when you consider the leverage, this number is much bigger. The cash-on-cash returns, or the actual money you're putting down versus how much you're receiving, is much higher. Thousands of people are getting very rich on paper doing exactly this, but just like all bubbles, when the music stops and the loans go underwater, their supposed riches quickly turn into bankruptcy. DSCRs are essentially the modern-day version of ninja loans, or no income and no jobs. They are given away based on an assumption of income produced by your so-called mini hotel, but this assumption is often overstated, and while we haven't had a deep recession for decades, once one shows up, these properties will quickly move towards bankruptcy. Not a lot of people are going to be booking Airbnbs if or when the unemployment rate hits 8%. Today, with so much money packed into this speculative STR market, the breeding grounds for the next crash have already been established, and it begins with the leveraged investor who happens to find himself in a modern day gold rush where strong STR returns are masking his complete recklessness, pushing the boundaries of creative financing, riding the line between outright fraud and risky bet.